Hello and welcome to another episode of Whither the Looniversity, the podcast of the Peerless Review. I'm Adam Elwanger, and I'm excited to talk to my guest today, who is Professor Aryeh Kontorovich, Professor of Computer Science at Ben Gurion University. He's won the Toronto Prize for Excellence in Research, won both Amazon and Google research grants, served in the past as director of the Ben Gurion University Data Science Research Center. He's published dozens of peer-reviewed articles in his area of expertise. His primary research interests are machine learning, probability, Markov chains, engineering, data analysis, lots of diversity there. Dr. Kontorovich, welcome.
Thanks, Adam, for inviting me. Welcome. Cheers.
So I ask everybody this at the beginning. How did you get interested in your areas of expertise to begin with? It seems, I think you and I are about the same age, and I think that you are you must have hit data science and machine learning at almost the perfect age to be where you are now, like really when it's coming into its full flourishing. How did you get interested in this stuff?
It's a great question. There's an interesting story behind it. So I wanted to be a doctor at a very young age. I wanted to be a surgeon. Then I wanted to be a neurosurgeon. And my parents kind of talked me down from it, and they said, you're too theoretical, too squeamish. Before they let you operate on the brain, you have to go through like guts and various other nasty stuff. So why don't you consider neuroscience instead? It's cleaner. And but as I was sort of preparing myself for med school, which I thought back when I still thought I'd go to med school, I thought I'd study Latin to help me memorize the medical terms. And I fell in love with the language. I took 4 years of Latin, and I guess 3 years of Latin in high school, and some more courses in college. One of them was amusingly called at Princeton Slander, Invective, and Profanity, Cursing in the Ancient World. A very, very an entertaining course. And I'm a native speaker of Russian. I was born in Russia. Came to the U.S. at age almost 10, and I studied Hebrew also. So I sort of the abstraction involved in switching between four languages just gives you an appreciation of how data is stored in the brain. How sort of there's this mystery where you read a novel and you can recount it at a very high level of detail. In other words, somebody asks you what's the novel about, you can recall characters' names, what they did, but you don't remember the words. You don't remember word for word. In fact, you have a really hard time, unless you're a savant, you have a really hard time, reciting any passage from the novel. And yet you remember the content. So what's being stored? What's the format? What's the internal language? How's the storage? How's that being processed? That was really, there's a thing called mentalese, an internal language of the brain. It's not English, it's not Hebrew, it's not any natural language. It's some kind of a universal internal language, which, it wouldn't have articles. It wouldn't have and the, because you know what you're referring to. You don't need to have these things. It wouldn't have synonyms, for example, right? It would be kind of everything. Every object has its own unique pointer, right? So I was fascinated by mentalese. I thought I'd study, how the brain processes language. And I did my undergraduate at Princeton, and I was fortunate because I did a summer internship at Bell Labs in, I believe it was 98, at Bell Labs in Murray Hill, New Jersey. And I was very fortunate to work with two really outstanding mentors, Daniel Lee, now at UPenn, and Sebastian Sung. He may be at MIT. Really outstanding neuroscientists, but very mathematically oriented neuroscientists, and they were in the process of inventing a new statistical tool that is now known as non-negative matrix factorization. It's a standard. It's become a standard tool. It's become something everybody uses. It's like regression, but it was being invented sort of before my eyes. I was present. I got to witness this process of creating a new statistical tool for analysis, and I was chatting with the various sort of big names in this emerging field of cognitive neuroscience, learning theory, AI. The term AI, we're talking about late 90s. the term AI was very much passé, very much not in vogue because of the AI winter that you might be aware of, right? The AI sort of in the 70s. So there was this approach to AI involving expert systems. So the idea was we're going to interview experts. This is the old idea. We're going to interview like a doctor or a mechanic and try to get their insight into how they solve problems and code that up into a program, and then that'll be the expert system. And that was an abysmal failure. That got nowhere. So that overpromised, badly overpromised, badly under delivered, and it was the cause of a so-called AI winter. So the funding dried up, the enthusiasm dried up.
Well, for a while, people thought this was a problem that couldn't be solved.
I guess not. It became clear that it's not going to be solved via coding up, all possible cases by hand. That became pretty clear. And so what began to emerge out of the ashes of this sort of old style AI expert systems, what began to emerge was this approach called statistical learning theory, meaning we're not going to try to attempt to write down a set of rules by which you say you recognize an image or you drive a car, right? There is no set of rules. We're going to try to just observe, get many examples from nature, get data, get tons and tons of data, and use this data to induce some rules automatically, maybe implicitly, maybe at the end of the day, there's not going to be a clean rule that says, okay, if you see a red light and it's not blinking, you should stop, but don't stop too quickly because you might cause that. So we're just going to get examples from either unlabeled examples, which are cheap and plentiful, or maybe labeled, maybe get an expert to label some examples for us. In other words, don't tell me how you perform a task. Just tell me this is, if you're, for example, if you're a radiologist, don't tell me how you diagnose tumors. Just tell me, just label some tumors for me on some X-rays, right? Just do that and give me those examples, and I'll take it from there. And that approach was far more successful than the rule-based, classical AI. And we're talking about late 90s, and I was, getting advice, getting inputs from various experts. I said, I want to go to grad school in neuroscience or cognitive neuroscience. And they all told me you should major in something more mathematical, like computer science, because that's where, all the big names actually came from physics. Major in something very fundamental, very mathematical, and then do whatever you want. After you get the mathematical foundations, you can really do. And this is, by the way, this is advice I still give to anybody who asks me. I tell them, get all the math tools, really, bulk up on math tools, because that's the bottleneck. Once you have all the mathematics, that's the real bottleneck between, researchers. Once you bulk up on math, you can go out and it opens up all kinds of doors. And I began my PhD at Carnegie Mellon in their Language Technologies Institute because I was still interested in language and applied linguistics. Again, it was my luck that I wrote a couple of early papers that I was having trouble publishing. Some of them are still unpublished and still being cited, but never get published. And I began to get my first results in theory, in actual, proving theorems, and that seemed to go well. So that's where I've been since then. So that's kind of a long circuitous, I don't know if it's more than you bargained for, but it's a very long circuitous path.
No,
I had no idea. Nobody had, not one person, we're talking about, early aughts. Not one person said to me, oh, go into machine learning. It'll be hot in, 2010, 15. I don't recall that being said, but they said, you'll do okay. You'll computer science, you'll do okay industry. I mean, you'll be fine. But nobody ever said, yeah, this is the big buzz. This is the big, So
yes. So it more or less was a fortuitous chain of events that landed you in this spot. And I think you have some good advice for students there. If students are listening, bulk up on the math, and you can do what you like. But as you were talking about the second approach after kind of the AI winter, the radiological example that you used, it seems to me that this is exactly, to my layperson's understanding, how ChatGPT works, right? You just give it an immense amount of data. In this case, that data is instances of language use. And it learns essentially, well, I guess the word learns is debatable here, but it's able to simulate language use, right?
Yeah.
And you've recently done some interesting, at least I don't know how interesting it is from a scientific perspective. It's interesting to me from a linguistic perspective, because what you've demonstrated is that with all of ChatGPT's sophistication in conversation, when you give it fairly elementary logic and probability problems, particularly word problems, not just math, not just a mathematical equation or something like that, but a problem that is described in terms of nouns and verbs and this kind of thing. And I think, is it fair to say that the problems you were giving to ChatGPT, that say an advanced sixth grader might be able to answer correctly?
So let me unpack, because there's a lot of stuff from the beginning. So first of all, there's a question of whether or not it learns. That was
Yeah.
the first issue. And yes, I think it definitely there's definitely learning. There's definitely learning as opposed to rote regurgitation. Definitely learning. It's definitely generalizing. It's definitely processing novel text that it probably hasn't seen before, contiguously as a single chunk. So there's definitely learning. There's definitely some sophisticated learning, some sophisticated generalization, for sure. There's even, I'd say there's even intelligence, because intelligence we can measure behaviorally. We can observe, intelligence isn't some abstract, fluffy quantity. It's measurable. We can it's your ability to solve problems, to generalize, to solve novel problems. So intelligence, you can you can give it IQ tests, I imagine. So it solves intelligent tasks. You can ask it to write you some code, or to do your taxes, right? You can give it. I'm sure you can give it. I think current GPT is at a stage where you can give it the tax code, all the tax, all whatever million pages of the tax code. It'll go through it. Then you give it your your particulars, your bank statements, and say, based on the law, tell me what I owe. And I think it'll do that very well, honestly. Uh,
This is just rote sort of number crunching, though.
it's
Uh,
well, it's understanding. It's understanding the rules. It's understanding. I wouldn't say understanding. Extracting the relevant rules from this huge body of text, figuring out how they apply to this case, and doing the arithmetic with the numbers. So you asked about the particular word problems. So let me, if I may, offer 2 pointers here, 2 pointers outside of this conversation. So one pointer is my Twitter account, where I posted these things, so people who are curious can go look. They're specific, carefully worked out examples.
if people want to follow you, what's your handle there?
Yeah, I can spell it out if you like. It's my first name Aryeh, and then Hazan, Hazan, which is like the Hebrew for it's a Hebraization of my last name. Sorry, Hazan. Just if you Google my full name and then Twitter, Google intelligence will guide you there. So that shouldn't be a
Okay.
problem. There's not. I don't think I have many impersonators at this stage.
So you
So
posted this stuff to Twitter.
I did, and the other pointer to the curious, there is a. I'm just listening. I'm just in mid podcast. Razib Khan recorded a podcast, I believe, with Kevin Mackay, I believe, or his most recent podcast is exactly about the sort of a layman's introduction and explanation behind GPT, what it stands for, how it works. It's so far, I'm halfway through. So far, it's excellent. So for those, I'm not a deep learning guy. I'm not a GPT. I couldn't tell you what all the inner workings are. But for those who are curious, that I think is a great place to get sort of a more technical feel for it. So, and finally, is it at a sixth grade level? Well, at some things, it's way beyond a sixth grade level, right? At some things,
Yes,
you have
way
right,
beyond, right?
right. It's hard to pin it down at a certain,
I'm saying your particular probability problems that you gave it, a smart sixth grader could get right.
Yeah, right. So I asked it, one question I asked it. So I gave it the prompt, I have black and white socks in my drawer, and I'm trying to draw. I need a matching pair. I don't care what color, but I need a matching pair. And if it's dark, I can't see what I'm drawing. What's the smallest number of socks that I must draw to guarantee that I have a matching pair? And the answer is 3, because if I get 2, it could be 1 white, 1 black, so it's not enough. But if it's 3, then definitely there'll be 2 of 1 color. And that got correct, unsurprisingly, because this problem is as old as dust, and there's plenty of worked out examples on it's seen it, right?
Yes.
And then I gave it a variant. There's an alien with 7 feet, and there's 7 colors, and same idea. And it got that badly wrong. It bungled it. It even got the basic arithmetic wrong. And you can follow. There's a thread where I sort of demonstrate how this, what I call catastrophic breakdown. Not just a little inaccuracy or a little makes up fake citation on Wikipedia. Kind of like just everything goes wrong. So it would be as if it would be as if in the middle of our conversation I casually remarked, "Oh, by the way, the moon is made out of cheese," and we all know that, right? Obviously. I just kept going, as if nothing happened, right? You would think I'm insane, and everything I just said is in question all of a sudden, because it's an insane thing to say. So there's an interesting philosophical question of, should we judge GPT by its successes or by its failures? What's a fair test? And my claim has been that its successes are very impressive, but its failures are very informative, because they give us insight into its limitations and into what it can't do. So I think we shouldn't keep a score of 100 successes, 1 failure. That's not the right way to score it. I think failures are interesting and insightful.
So this is my question then. So you give it an alien at 7 feet. We've got 7 different colors of socks. How many socks does it have to draw out of the drawer? It gets it badly, badly wrong. My question is,
even after I tried to sort of to hint to it and prompt to it, and even I gave it the right answer. So I said at one point, I said the right answer is 43. Explain why. And it just blew it. You didn't get that.
So my question then is, what does this tell us? You said that the failures are instructive. What does this tell us about what ChatGPT is and how it works, and what its legitimate applications might be?
So you should take what I say with a grain of salt, because, as I said, I'm not a deep learning researcher. I'm not an engineer. So I think I'm more of a philosopher in this case than an engineer. And to me, I've been going around saying that, to me, GPT has been illustrating the distinction between understanding and intelligence, because GPT is this strange instance of intelligence without understanding. Okay, the way it was trained, roughly speaking, is it's a learning system that gets rewarded for predicting the next token. So it's been trained on lots of text, and it looks back some window, some 100 words back, or however many words back, and tries to predict the next word, the next token. Now, if you had shown me the transcripts of GPT, so I've been having fun. I've been having conversations with like Spinoza and Nietzsche. Those are amazing. Those are super informative, super fun, super, for me, rather than reading a book this thick, I can just dive down to the interesting points and say, I asked Nietzsche, what's your greatest contribution? And he gave me the answer. And I said, oh, but isn't that like Machiavelli? He said, no, it's different. Okay, it's similar, but his distinction. So really gives you like a full course, from a top expert, assuming it's not lying, which you have to make sure. But really, I mean, amazing tool. So it does all that. But then, so those are all the things it's obviously seen. It's obviously been trained on this, right?
So can I ask you this? My hang up with the AI, as somebody who has very little scientific and mathematical training, I'm interested in consciousness. And there's so much to this that looks to me like consciousness. And you just said, assuming it's not lying. Now, when I think about lying, I think of an agentive cognitive process.
Yeah, I didn't mean
Right.
that. I didn't mean that. I meant just bullshit. Just being, flubbing, being wrong, being wrong.
Okay,
So
but it
so if
looks
you had
like lying, right?
so if you had shown me, so what I started saying, if you had shown me these transcripts of these conversations 5 years ago and asked me, what do you think about the system that's producing this exchange? I would have said, wow, it's conscious, it has full intelligence. You're speaking with a conscious, intelligent, sentient entity. And now that I've played around with it, it's clear to me that it's not really understanding what's happening. So I here's a simple illustration. Also on one of my Twitter threads. So the way I test it often is I'll translate a joke from Russian because on the assumption that it hasn't been trained on that because all the English jokes it's seen. So here's a Russian joke. There's a boat park that's renting boats, and you've seen this, right?
I saw this. Yes, it's a good joke. Go ahead and
And
tell it.
yeah, but one you hadn't heard before, right? Because it's from Russian,
That's right.
right?
So tell it.
So the joke is it's this place is closing down for the day, and the guard sort of yells into the loudspeaker, "Okay, all boats come back. Boat number 9. That means you too." And the boss calls him over and says, "We only have 8 boats." And then he yells, "Okay, boat 6. Is there a problem?" Um, and and you're laughing because in your mind you imagine boat number 6 flipped over, everybody's
Right.
drowned. Yes, there is a problem. Of course, there's a problem. It's a hell of an understatement. They're dead. um, but first of all, I told her this text without telling her that it's a joke. Its reaction was very interesting. It spun this whole tale about some other boats from a different part came over, and it continued the narrative. It just took over and continued the narrative. And then I said, that was a joke. What was funny about it? Oh, it's funny because you confused the numbers 6 and 9 because they're similar. And I asked, well, what mishap might have caused that confusion? And he said, "Oh, it's under various lighting angles, under various positions, it confuses." And I tried various honest to God, I tried to nudge it into well, something happened there, and some physical. No, so it has no understanding of boats, water. Boats can flip over. It's funny, tragic, whatever, dark humor. Missed that entirely. So I mean, okay, I think that's clearly you're not dealing with with a full set of cards there,
But
right?
it's also interesting that precisely what makes it a joke is the fact that it's kind of brain teaser. There's a split second for the human that says, "Wait a second, what's going on?" And you go,
Right,
"Oh, right,
right,
it flipped
right,
over."
right, right.
Right.
So
And
it got the hard part. It got the 6 and 9 are related. So that to me indicates that there's no understanding. There's no model. There's no you don't. It's not imagining a boat. It's not imagining the motion of the water, what water can do. But what's truly amazing and uncanny is how far one can get without understanding. That's something I learned. That to me is my biggest takeaway, my biggest paradigm shift. I would say it's, to me personally, in my personal little world, it's sensational. It's astounding how far it's possible to get without understanding.
so it's kind of like I assume you've seen the American film Rain Man with Dustin
Yes,
Hoffman.
yes,
It's
yes,
kind of
yes.
like we have Rain Man here in GPT, who has these amazing abilities, but also this sort of fascinating obliviousness to all of the contextual elements of
A
life.
little bit, right? A little bit, a little bit. I imagine. I think autism has. There's a specific, as far as I understand, there's a specific impairment in processing emotion and interpreting other people's emotions. I imagine if you asked Rain Man, why would 6 and 9, I think he might figure out that it flipped over because it's a physical thing, it's a mechanical thing. I imagine even then he might have, his understanding is limited, but as far as other people go, not as far as like a boat flipping over on a
Yeah.
river. I imagine.
So let me ask you this too, and I'm going to go into this question a little backwards. Oftentimes I'll ask students, what did we learn in this course? Or I'll ask them a question that, we talked about at many points during the semester. And I'll say, all right, you guys know this. We've talked about this many times. they start flipping through their notebooks. And I say, no notebooks, right? We've been over this many times, right? What is the answer? And they can't answer it without the notes. And then I say to them, well, then you haven't learned it. If you still need to go back in the notes, then you haven't learned it. In other words, for me, what learning is an ability to carry the information forward after some duration of time. Like, in
It's
other
it's
words,
it's connections, compression, right? You
is
compress,
the
yeah,
knowledge operative after the moment where I just gave it to you?
absolutely,
And
absolutely.
you've described, you've talked about GPT. You've said that it's learning, and I wonder, is it learning in that sense? Like, we can instruct it in the moment where I kind of lead it, like you said, to the answer, and then it can maybe in the ensuing few minutes apply that same lesson to certain other questions. But if I were to come back to it, say 2 days later, and ask it to apply what it had learned from an earlier date, could it do it? And if it can't, is it really learning at all if it has to go back in the notebook?
Right. So good question. So this is actually has a very simple answer. So have you talked with GPT? Have you done
Yeah.
this?
Yep.
So it saves chats.
Yes.
So if you go back to the same chat 2 days later, it'll just pick up where it left off. It'll remember everything because it's all there because its memory is the chat. It just goes back,
That's pretty fascinating. I never thought
So
of it that way.
yeah,
That
yeah. So that's easy. Now between chats, it's a new, session each time. So
it's a
so
baby every time you
it's
start.
a baby, right? Well, it's a baby that's come with a lot of pre-installed, all the knowledge of GPT, but it's a tabula rasa as far as the interaction with you.
Okay.
Does that answer your
Yeah,
question?
but I guess my if I wanted to play devil's advocate, since it's a baby every time, I would say, well, it's really not learning, right? Because it
Only
can't.
because only because not for any fundamental reason. Only because the way it's set up, the makers, the interaction, the account isn't. There's no feedback. In other words, it's not. It's a neural net with like weights that are during what is learning in the neural net. You update the weights, you change the weights, right?
Yeah, but I
So
can access, like, when I come to a new conversation, I can access the logs in that conversation, and that's
right,
part of what learning is for me.
no,
If
right,
it can't access the logs,
yeah, but
then
it's pure. The limitation is not fundamental. It's purely just the way it's been set up. As far as the account goes. In other words, in fact, even probably for your own privacy. I mean, would you want your conversations to, you know, be used by OpenAI? I mean, maybe not. Maybe there's some stuff that you don't want. But by the
so
way, by the way, PSA to everybody: don't give it anything, even if it says it's not, being sent back. Don't trust it. Don't give it any sensitive. Don't give it any sensitive information. Really, anything you say will be used against you in the court of law, possibly literally.
okay, good advice. So you're saying that it's just the way it's set up. So let me ask you this. Could they revise sort of the setup to where it can access all of those prior
Easily,
conversations?
easily,
Okay,
very
that's actually
easily.
kind of dark, because then we do have something that can infinitely build on
Absolutely. I, I tweeted about that. I had a tweet about that. How much I said, imagine if GPT had been continuously learning from all its interactions with us all this time. And then I said, who says it isn't?
yeah.
We don't know. We don't know if it's not. I mean, they don't, they haven't announced it, but you're exchanging information over the internet. It's going somewhere.
And so this is, I mean, this is kind of beyond the scope of the rote kind of intellectual concerns here, but there's the geopolitical concerns of what a very strong AI could do. And in the United States, anyways, and in some of the Western countries of the world, we've had some top figures that sort of acknowledge maybe we should just slow down with this just a little bit before we understand this. My question, I guess, is can we count on state actors like China, or other, I guess, loosely anti-Western regimes, to be as cautious with these tools as we are being, or will the allure of the power that a strong AI would give be too much for them to forego?
Let me respond with a rhetorical question. Can you count on China not to engage in bioweapons research? Can you count on China not to engage in industrial espionage? Uh, so, and there is your answer as far as I'm concerned.
Well,
Now,
if that's the case, if we can't count on them, and I agree, then isn't there some argument that we have an obligation to continue with the
yes,
research? Like,
yes. So the retort, I've obviously I've engaged in this a lot over the past few weeks. The retort is that China currently lags behind, and so there's a very specific kind of processor that is it's not required, but there's you have to understand there are enormous challenges as far as processing these huge, vast, massive of data. So you need just the sheer. Think of it as like building a I don't know, not a nuclear weapon, but building a new chip factory, like a new factory for for state of the art chips. Right? China doesn't have that. That's in Taiwan, right? So technologically, getting this thing to work, you need billions of dollars, which China has. We also need technology that it might not necessarily have. In part because there are these GPUs, graphics processing units, that I think I'm fuzzy on this, so don't take it with a grain of salt. I believe the U.S. stopped exporting those to China because they're strategic. Just the processing power. These are just chips, computer chips, not but just because I guess we reasoned that hey, they can't manufacture them on their own. They don't have the technology, and this stuff is very powerful. This stuff can be used for military and various applications. And let's stop selling it to them. And so there's an argument, which again I have no idea how solid this is, but there's an argument being made by people who presumably know better than me that it wouldn't be so easy for China to catch up on its own, this kind of thing. And so if just we unilaterally decide to pause this, who's we? I guess the US, Google, OpenAI, then maybe it'll actually genuinely be paused for a while. I mean, eventually China will catch up. Eventually they'll all catch up. It's a question of time.
well, that's comforting. That's one of the more comforting assessments I've heard of this.
But I don't know how accurate that is.
Okay.
I'm going based on what.
So you have said in an earlier conversation of ours that you think that that GPT could pass a Turing test. It seems that there's been some debate over this. For listeners, if you don't know what a Turing test is, basically it's a question of if we allowed you to have a chat with some entity online, could you tell whether or not you're talking to a computer? Right. For a long time, this has been a measure of have we constructed artificial intelligence? Well, when you can't tell if you're talking to a computer, then that passes the Turing test, Alan Turing's test that he devised. And then we have something that we could loosely call artificial intelligence. Aryeh, why do you say it's past the Turing test? Do you think it's that strong that we can't like generally it's indistinguishable?
So to steal a line from this podcast of Razib Khan that I just heard like an hour ago, in some sense it fails the Turing test because it knows too much. No single human could possibly give you discourses on Nietzsche and Chinese poetry, medieval poetry, and various plastic kinds.
There's too much knowledge.
Too much knowledge, yeah. But I mean, I think the Turing test might be inherently flawed as a measure of intelligence because you always assume you come to a conversation from an assumption of good faith, right? When I'm talking to you, I expect that just like me, that you're acting in good faith. You're not deceiving. You're not trying to catch me. You're not trying to entrap me in the gotcha. You're not trying to get me to to slip up. you're not testing me. You're not doing this to test if I'm a machine or not. We're just we're two guys having a conversation. And as soon as a conversation becomes adversarial in the sense that, I'm trying to figure out, is this a machine or not? Well, try carrying that on with a human, see how he reacts. Just try it. It's I'll bet you it'll turn weird. I'll bet you it'll turn
it'll turn weird or nasty real fast.
Right. So clearly I've caught GPT. You could easily catch a GPT in slip-ups that'll make anybody realize it's not human. You have to know where to look. It's not going to be, if you're inexperienced, if you don't know what you're looking. In other words, if you're unsuspecting, you could be fooled. If you know where to look, you'll find easily in many such instances. So does that kind of?
Yeah, it does. One of the things that, I'm working in an English department, and people are very concerned about GPT writing papers. And it's exactly what you just said. I'm not that concerned, because the way that I feel about it is I can recognize it in a second, because the writing is too clean, right? There's not enough errors. And that's how I know that it wasn't written. Now, that said, I shouldn't say what I'm about to say, right?
Because they're gonna start putting in errors on purpose, right?
That's it.
Yeah.
Now, the question is whether or not students are sophisticated enough to take the extra steps that would be necessary to.
Even if they are, there's going to be a website that does it for them.
That's true. Do they? I mean, we keep leveling down the effort. Do they have enough effort to go to the website to have it done for them? Right. So the Chinese room. This is another sort of classic test of artificial intelligence, at least sort of in the thought experiment world. And I guess I'll try to explain to viewers if you don't know what the Chinese room is basically, it's just, boy, it's such a long explanation. You could probably explain it better than I could quickly.
So there's a philosopher named, I guess, John Searle. I think his first name is John.
Searle.
And he was arguing, I think he constructed this thought experiment to argue that, I guess that maybe to argue my point, actually, that it's possible to have, intelligent behavior without understanding, without consciousness. It's a little bit, it's funny because I'm about to demolish I'll give the thought experiment, I'll demolish it, but it's kind of making my point. So we'll get to that. So here's the thought experiment. You are sitting in a room, and you have and you receive slips of paper through a window, and you have a huge rule book. You have a huge, enormous book that tells you what to do with each slip of paper, and you follow the rules. If you change it, you're doing pure symbolic manipulation. That's, to you, is meaningless.
You're translating messages, say, from Chinese into English.
You don't even know that. You're not aware of that. You, as far as you're concerned, you're carrying out meaningless mechanical tasks. Now, what it turns out is that you're actually carrying conversation in Chinese. What it turns out is that the messages you receive are in Chinese, and your output is in Chinese, and you're carrying on some intelligent conversation in Chinese, which you have no idea about. You don't know Chinese. You don't understand the messages, right? You're just following some complicated set of rules.
Yes.
And Searle, and sort of Searle's, gotcha. Searle's sort of, conclusion is that, where's the intelligence? Where's the understanding? You're apparently, the person conversing with the room thinks that it's intelligent, but really nobody speaks Chinese in that whole conglomerate, in that whole who speaks Chinese? Where's the understanding, right? So I think it's a very weak analogy for a number of reasons. First of all, there's the time scale, right? To implement this, time scales matter, right? If you and I are carrying a conversation, and you're running your time scale, and I'm running, I reply to you once in a century, right? That's not, time scales, I'm in computer science. We do computation, we do algorithms. Runtimes matter. Time scales matter to actually, quantity becomes quality all of its own.
So there's an imminence to the communication.
there's a more fundamental sort of first principles objection, which is, well, you understand English, right? You process English. Well, it's not really you, it's your brain. And it's not really your brain, it's your neurons. But no single neuron, not one of you can't point to me to a neuron that speaks English, right? The neurons don't speak English. They perform these very simple tasks. So where is the English being understood? It's not, it's this whole system. So the response is the system understands English, not any part of it, but the system does it. And in the same sense, the room as a system understands Chinese, speaks Chinese. So I think Searle, this example of neurons performing dumb tasks to create emergent intelligent behavior, I think that kind of shows that Searle's kind of it's not the right, as in the words of Daniel Dennett, the philosopher of mind, it's not the right intuition pump. It doesn't in other words, a good analogy is supposed to strengthen the intuition or isolate some key components and clean, it doesn't do that. It kind of muddles the water rather than clarifying things.
Well, isn't this part of Searle's insight, is that like if a computer works that way, just applies the rules and is able to spit out this message, that ultimately, even if we look down on that as kind of a rudimentary way of doing it, it's almost exactly what the brain does, right? So that ultimately it's the computer isn't doing anything that's that much different than what the brain does.
Is that what he was saying? So was he arguing against consciousness? Is he saying consciousness is not real, it's an illusion?
I don't think he goes that far, but I do think that he sort of draws the conclusion that ultimately, we can't identify the computer thing because the biological intelligence works roughly the same way.
I would agree with that. I don't think we need to go to the Chinese room for I think there's a much simpler argument, and it goes like this. I don't even know whose argument it is, because it's probably as old as the ancient Greeks. So the argument is as follows: take a human and replace his neurons. Imagine that it's possible to replace a neuron by, to simulate a neuron with a mechanical or a silicon or some non-biological device that exactly replicates the input-output behavior of a neuron. It's not that far-fetched. I mean, there's some assumptions there, but it's not terribly far-fetched, right? And then you take this person and you're conversing with him, and you replace his neurons one at a time with their, non-biological simulations, right? So at which point does it stop being human? At which point does it stop being conscious or intelligent or whatever? It's silly. So I think once you so to me, it's pretty clear that there's no principled way to distinguish between inherently human intelligence versus, some simulation.
All right, I got to pull this back onto my disciplinary sure ground here. This is a nasty question to ask after that. Do you believe in the soul?
Well, okay, you have to keep in mind that I'm wearing a kippah, a yarmulke. So I'm an Orthodox Jew. I'm an observant Jew. Now, a very interesting thing about Orthodox Jews, Judaism is very much about action. So a lot, there's this thing called halacha, which is, how you act. We have very, very strict dietary laws, and like I'm wearing a white shirt because the Sabbath is about to start in a few hours. When Sabbath starts, I won't be using a computer. I won't be writing. I won't be making, lighting a fire. And there are various, really, really tiny minutiae that you have to study very carefully. Belief, we almost never talk about. Belief is almost, in fact, I think I've gotten the sense that among observant Jews, among Orthodox Jews, talk about belief, asking another Jew all the time, do you really believe in God? That's almost indecent because it's private. Right. I'll ask a fellow Jew, what level of kashrut do you keep? Because it's important. Because if I want to go out to a restaurant, I want to know if we have the same level of, can we both eat there, right? That's important. But do you actually believe in the soul? It's almost a little bit indecent, because that's between him and God. That's too private to even go there. So I will respond that my identity. So first of all, I wear two hats. I'm a scientist. I'm a philosopher. When I do science, I just do science. How do I engage with science? Science is a game like chess. It has rules. So it's not about truth. It's not about is there God? Is there not? It could be that God is real, but it's not a scientific theory. So as far as science has nothing to say about that. So when we do science, we play by the rules. We play by the rules of science. That's it. Now, when I play by the rules of Judaism or humanity, I'm an Israeli. I'm a Zionist, so I identify with my people. I identify with my country. So obviously, I will identify with to me it's a package. To me, Judaism is a Judaism, Zionism. It's all one package. There's the land, there's the religion, there's the people, there's the language. It's all one package. That's how I see it. So publicly, I can give you no other answer. I can give no other answer than yes. I believe that the Torah is God's literal truth, and there's a soul. And by the way, Judaism is also very vague on what happens after you die. It's very, very vague. We don't talk about it. We don't really. I mean, you don't want to die. You want to live because you have a lot of things to accomplish in this world. And it's actually very, very and there's this notion that if you've been good, you'll be rewarded in some vague sense. If you've been bad, you'll be punished in some vague sense. But that's not what this is all about. This is about here and now.
The reason I ask is not to do gotcha. It's because whenever I listen to computer scientists in particular speak, and I hear them say things like what you said, where could we replace a neuron with a chip? It seems to me, I don't know if you're a Star Wars fan, but I was a big fan when I was a child. The original Star Wars is, and Yoda pinches Luke on the arm and says, "Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter." And it seems to me that whenever we talk about building consciousness, whatever that luminous part of us, which to me seems to be the thing that really makes us humans, that seems to be the element that's always left out of this equation. And
that's because we have no idea. We have no idea how to talk about it. We have no idea how to formalize it. So, do you know Eric Howell?
No, I don't think so.
He's a very interesting. I guess he was a neuroscientist. He was an academic neuroscientist who left the academia to write fiction about neuroscience.
Ah.
And he has at least two books out. One of them I'm in the middle of right now. It's called the Revelations. So here's a plug for Eric Cole. And you can look it up. He's on Twitter. He's on Substack. So his whole PhD research was about consciousness, and the neural, not the philosophy. I mean, he's a philosopher too, but mainly the neural correlates of consciousness. And I've been trying to, I thought about consciousness a lot. I've read all the books by Dennett and Hofstadter, and sort of my late teens were spent a lot obsessing with consciousness and philosophy of mind. And lately, I've kind of been trying to grab any philosopher that I can get my hands on, and ask him, has there been any novel insight about consciousness since the Greeks? And the answer is usually no. We're stuck pretty much exactly where we've been 2000. Plato identified the mind-body problem. It's a problem. It's still a problem. We're still the soul thing, right? It's the mind-body problem, right? That's what it is. It's a paradox of the human condition, that we are on the one hand, we're these noble creatures with, that can access higher math and poetry and philosophy, and on the other hand, we're hunks of matter. And how do you reconcile that? We're still, as far as I can tell, we're not any further than 2,000 years ago.
Good. I don't want us to get any further. This is what worries me, is that you guys are a little too hot on the trail here to get us further. I want to stay where we are.
I'm not sure. Well, I think that at some point we will get behavior in the machine, in silicon behavior, that is truly, you can chat with it and you won't be able to poke any holes. It'll behave, as human as any other human you chat with by a keyboard, right? And okay, and you have full access to all of its weights, to all of its algorithms, to all of its workings, and you still won't know what consciousness is. In other words, you'll think it's conscious, and you'll be able to read, just like when we read, we can access, we can do MRI, fMRI, we can PET scans, we can look at people's brains, and we still don't know. It's there somewhere, but we still don't know where it is, right? So there's something fundamentally mysterious about consciousness to where just zooming in under a microscope doesn't really seem to give it to.
So this wouldn't be an episode of the Whither the Looniversity podcast if we didn't talk about this topic. So speaking of soullessness, I want to talk a little bit about wokeism in Israeli academia and culture, and also in the math and sciences. You live in Israel. Do you guys have the same problems that we have institutionally there, or is that still kind of a relative safe space from the, I guess, cultural Maoism that it reigns in the university in America?
We are eagerly importing all the hip and cool trends from the US. Our university has just, I think, in the past year, opened an office of diversity and inclusion at Ben Gurion in Israel, which I was very, very much opposed to. But the thing is, here's the tragedy. I feel like Cassandra. I feel like I'm this lone prophet of doom, because I tell my Israeli colleagues, I tell them this is where it's headed. This is where it is, and they think I am exaggerating. Not outright lying, but they think I'm paranoid. It'll never happen here. That's America. That's them. That's not us. That's what that they're crazy. We're not. And diversity and inclusion. And they tell me what could possibly be wrong? What kind of an ogre would you have to be to oppose such nice things as diversity and inclusion? And I tell them, look, already our university has a committee for investigating racist incidents. So already, anybody, in particular a disgruntled student, can anonymously tip off this committee, anonymously complain about a faculty member. And the faculty member will be put through hell for 2 years. Will be investigated. Their life will be disrupted. They'll be, dragged through, and eventually you're found innocent. Eventually, the process works. You're innocent. You're free to go, right? After you have an ulcer and a couple of heart attacks, and your research has stalled for 2 years. No, you're fine. You're free to go. So the process is the punishment, right? And there's no accountability. There's no. You don't get a lawyer. You don't get to face your accuser. It's anonymous. It's Orwellian. It's frightening. But racism is a bad thing. So obviously, we need some time. So anyway, I really wish Israelis follow American news more closely, and they don't.
So why is it that they would import these things then? I understand how they might be in the position still where they say, what's wrong with it? But why would they actively emulate these American processes?
Israeli academics, almost by default, are U.S. educated, either PhD or post. It's almost a requirement. So in Israeli academia, there's an expectation that you did one of your either PhD or postdoc abroad, and abroad typically means the U.S. So the Israeli academics are very, very much plugged into the U.S. culture of the academia with all of its ideologies and shibboleths. Our president is an American expat of the university. Our university president, our rector is a U.S. expat.
So essentially, what you're saying is that American universities are exporting wokeism more or less globally. I mean,
kind of, yeah. I mean, it seems that they're encouraging science from France. I think the French intellectuals, French academics, and even the left wing are kind of rebelling against it, which is a surprising and encouraging sign.
Wait, the French are rebelling against something?
Yeah, right. It's not the headline you'd expect to. Yeah, but apparently even the French have had enough of this. It's funny because a lot of this Pomo stuff, came from France, right? So
right.
So
yes.
So, except America's made it industrial strength, right? So and also so it's even academics, even Israeli academics that are, I'm right wing. By the way, spoiler, I'm actually right. I'm a conservative. I'm right wing. This is like, I mean, it's who I am. I'm not ashamed. I'm not ashamed of it. Sorry?
Don't let any leftists come on the podcast, so
Right,
everybody
right.
knows.
No, I'm just like, in case anybody didn't know, in case anybody had questions, I happen to be right wing. It's okay. It's legitimate. I'm not ashamed of it. I don't bite. Um, and even like-minded people in Israel that I speak to, and I tell them, look, this is, we should be vigilant. We should be resisting. They say, oh, it's not going to happen here. We have bigger problems. We do have, we have Iran. We have. By the way, you asked early on why are Russian Jews particularly sensitive to
Yes,
this.
this will let me set up the question because that was before we began recording. A few years back, I wrote an open letter that many academics signed, and as I looked at the list of academics on these signatories, one thing that jumped right off the page to me was how many Russian last names were on this letter that expressed concern about the state of the culture on campus. And I wonder why so many Russians, everything.
Let me do a very Jewish thing to you and ask you, why do you think that is?
I suspect that it's because many of them, and this is a suspicion because I don't know their ages, but I suspect that many of them are the children of people who lived through Soviet communism and have heard from their parents about what life was like, and that they are uniquely attuned in kind of a seismographic way to these changes at the level of culture that could lead to a very dark place. And I guess what I'm asking is that
exactly right? You're exactly right. I couldn't say it better myself. The telltale signs are, it's all there. It's, almost word for word. There are these rules that are unspoken, unwritten. In other words, what is, they keep changing. They keep, you have to be attuned to the culture. In other words, who says that you can't say homeless, but you must say unhoused, right? Who is that a rule somewhere? No, you have to pick it up. You have to pick up, when did transsexual become transgender, right? There's no directive that says you have to stop saying X and start saying Y. You just have to be. It's a signal that you're attuned. You picked up on this new jargon.
When did we stop saying prostitute and start saying sex workers?
Sex worker, right. Well, we used to say whore. Right. Don't stop saying.
Right.
So it's signaling. It's game theory. It's basically game theory. It's signaling. And there's no sight more entertaining than watching, leftist autophagy, watching them eat each other. It's great because we see right wingers. We're not appetizing. They're not trying to eat us, right? They eat each other, and it's just get the popcorn and watch, because it's, trying to watching people trying to and they have to, because they're fighting for a limited number of positions. So the way to get ahead is by stepping on each other. They're destroying civilization in the process. So it's not, it's not a very happy spectacle, but it's entertaining.
It's a purity contest. It's an authenticity battle to see who could be most purely, truly victimized and righteous.
And honestly, I wonder how much of this is sincere belief and how much of this is cynical, just getting ahead and virtue signaling and just, power games, power grabs, power struggles.
I think it differs from discipline to discipline. I think in the humanities, there are many true believers. But I wonder, and maybe this is a good question to end with, how about the sciences, engineering, mathematics? In those fields, do you see it slipping away also? And if so, are those people true believers, or are they social climbers?
Good question. Good. So for a long time, math and engineering, math science, physics, computer science, really, you have to. For years, I thought it was safe because, what can I have the immense privilege, and I still do, of being able to get up in front of a class and just tell them everything I believe in without any reservations, because it's all, it's the same stuff that's been teaching, since the 60s, since the 40s. Okay, so first of all, you have to distinguish. I think a lot of people don't make the distinction between there's math education, which belongs to ed schools. They're not mathematicians, they're math ed people. Ed schools are evil. They must be closed down, destroyed. The earth should be salted. Ed schools are the source of all evil. They're worse than gender. The ed schools are just the worst.
Agreed. That's the departments of education and universities are the
Really,
fount of much evil.
really. And that's where you get this, math is racist, or I'm sorry, math is rooted in racism.
Yes, right. There's a big difference. There's a big difference.
Yes. It's rooted in racism. And so what you get is this Mott and Bailey kind of back and forth. So you'll have some really out there, really crazy, like marginal figures throwing some, having some workshop at some math conference that says, that whatever, some title I can't even pronounce, white, hetero, cis, heteronormal patriarchy, and it's so insane that they'll say, oh, it's just one guy, or oh, it's a big conference, it's just this one. In other words, they won't condemn it. They'll condemn me for noticing, for not picking, right? So I'm the bad guy for noticing that. Now,
why are you so intolerant?
Right. Now, if I held a conference where, everybody, if I held a computer science conference where every speaker gave a normal talk, except one who mentioned casually that, by the way, of course, the point of computer science is to build a eugenic society. Of course, the point of computer science is further eugenics, right? Obviously. And that was all he said. That would kill that would kill me, my conference, my career, everything, because I'm not allowed to have one, crazy guy, crazy thing.
It's when the left's crazies must be tolerated in the name of diversity and free expression. The right's crazies must be shut down because they are a threat to civil society.
Right. Now, they've been doing some real damage, by the way, mostly in elementary education, and mostly by doing away with like algebra and calculus because of various concerns about disparate impact. And that's causing real damage. Real damage to society, real damage to the kids who can't afford private tutors, because the wealthier families will get their kids algebra and calculus, right? So it's so hypocritical, and it's so just cruel and callous, and it's hurting precisely the kids who need it most. I have no words, no words of condemnation strong enough for the evil people who are furthering this for their own, gain, for their own financial gain and otherwise. Just despicable, hateful individuals who are causing real harm. The left loves to talk about harms, right? So they're causing real, lasting harm to poor kids who can't afford, math tutors. Really, just beyond words.
Margaret Thatcher was really famous, in one of her excellent rants before Parliament, where she was condemning the British Marxists, and she said they would rather that the poor be poorer than have the rich be richer, right? And this is where they are, the leftists, with this stuff now, is they would rather everybody be less educated overall, right, than have some people excel and everybody have a little bit higher level of education. They'd rather it be more miserable.
Absolutely. And just to add one more level of cynicism to all of this, I believe the Marxists in Thatcher's day weren't out to make a buck out of all of this, weren't out to grift. And these guys, on top of everything which you just said, they're also doing it to secure some position as a vice dean of something or whatever. Or
so the grift is king. The grift has got to be in there somewhere,
Yeah.
Well, that is not a optimistic note to end on, but perhaps the positive note is the autophagia that you talked about, right? At some point, all of them will consume one another, and then you and I will sort through the wreckage and pick up the gems.
Let's hope we don't get consumed in the process. Yeah, that's the tricky part. Is not being killed in the process of this civilization collapse.
Well, best of luck to you in evading the appetites of the Israeli woke.
Thank you.
Dr.
Thank you.
Aryeh Kontorovich, thank you very much. It's been fun.
Me. Thanks, man. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye-bye.